Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Old Time Rock and Roll. I'm your host, David Tear, where I've been featuring my personal 3,000 top songs of the rock era from 1954 to 1999. Today, I'm up to song number 2952, which is Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard by Paul Simon. This song was featured on his second solo album, just called Paul Simon. Came out in 1972. This was the first, I think, solo album he had after Simon and Garfunkel broke up for the first time in 1970. They did get back together a couple times later. I'll get into that, but for about 5 years after Garfunkel broke up with him, he went solo. He actually had a very successful solo career. This album had a couple hits on it, including the one I just mentioned, Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, as well as Mother and Child Reunion. And then in 70, here's a picture of Simon and Garfunkel, by the way. I probably should have showed this to you earlier. So they were a very successful duo. I'm not going to go into their history. Paul Simon, I think, was just as successful with Art Garfunkel. That's Art on the right, that's Paul on the left. I think Paul was the main songwriter of the duo. Art was the main singer. Art had a really beautiful voice, but he wasn't. I don't think he was anywhere nearly as good a songwriter as Paul Simon. He had a little bit of a solo career after he broke up with Paul Simon, but not much. I think he had a couple oldies that he remade as hits, like "I Only Have Eyes for You." I don't even know what else, but anyway, yeah, Simon was the main one, and he had several other albums. His next album in '73 was called "There Goes Rhymin' Simon." This one had the hits um, "Kodachrome" and "Loves Me Like a Rock." And then in '75, he had this album here called "Still Crazy After all these years." This one had the title track "Still Crazy." I think it was his only number one songs as a solo artist, "50 Ways to Leave Your Lover," which is a really excellent song. And he also had, I guess they had a song by him and Art Garfunkel. They reunited for a while, I think in 1975, '76. Had a song called "My Little Town." That's on this album as well. And then I don't think he had any albums for a while. His next big one came out in 1980. Was called "One Trick Pony," and this was a good album. It had the title track, and it also had the song "Late in the Evening," which was a big hit, another big hit for him. I think that one went to number two, didn't quite make it to number one. And then I think his biggest album, or at least his most well-known album, was this one called "Graceland." I'm sure you guys have all heard of this one. This was a big effort of him to kind of make people aware of apartheid. I mean, he collaborated with some South African musicians, and beautiful songs on this album. I never owned this album, but he had several hits. They weren't really huge hits, but he had Graceland. I guess that was a title track. He also had Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, and he had I think his biggest hit on this album was called "You Can Call Me Al." And that one, I believe, did make the top 40. I think it's the only one that did on this album. And it was also used by Al Gore, the presidential candidate who ran against W in 2000. Unfortunately, W won. But Al Gore had a very good campaign, and he used this song as his campaign song. "You Can Call Me Al." And anyway, yeah, so that's kind of Paul Simon's history. Like I said, he was a very successful artist, both as a duo with part of a duo with Art Garfunkel, also as a solo artist. And I just want to say a little bit about this song, "Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard." I've got several songs by Paul Simon on my list, by the way, also several by Simon and Garfunkel. But the reason I guess I rated this one so low, I don't know. I mean, it's a good song, but it's not really one of my favorites of his. The lyrics are kind of cryptic. I mean, it starts out, I guess he was out with his friend Julio playing outside and they did something illegal. He never says what they did. And I think a lot of people asked him after this song came out, what were you doing that was illegal with Julio? And he said he didn't have an answer. It just was, the first verse he says it was against the law what his mama saw. His mama pajama, I guess he calls her. I guess she was wearing his pajamas or something. She rolled out of bed and then she sees him with his friend Julio doing something illegal on the street, but they never said what it was. And a pretty cryptic song, but it's a good song and it's got a good melody. And like I said, not my favorite of Paul Simon's songs, but it was good enough to make my list. Number 2952. So anyway, that's my profile on Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard by Paul Simon. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.